Hello and welcome to this Q&A with the Fertility Alliance. Today we're going to be talking about making a decision to stop having fertility treatment, and we're joined by Kelly, who has personal experience of this and who's also helped a lot of other people through these decisions. So welcome, Kelly. I wondered if you would be okay if you could start by telling us a bit about your own personal experience.
Yeah, of course, and thank you so much for inviting me along to these Q&As. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to share some of my own personal experience. So, we said previously, in terms of this session, I'm 10 years post ending treatment now. So it is a while ago when we ended treatment. We basically started to conceive mid-20s after I got married. Our journey was almost a decade long infertility journey, where it took probably 3 years in the NHS system to go through tests after recognising that things weren't happening after about a year. So we ended up having 6 cycles of Clomid initially. The final session did actually work. It was I had a positive pregnancy test, but unfortunately 11 weeks I had a miscarriage. So that kind of ended that part of the Clomid journey. Through the NHS, they then said, okay, we can fund 3 rounds of IUI. So we went on to have the 3 rounds of IUI, also with Clomid, and that was unsuccessful. And like I say, at this point, there'd been a lot of tests, a lot of waiting, a lot of try this, come back in 3 months. And we had the funding for 1 cycle of IVF back then. And we were due to start it. We'd come back, I remember quite vividly coming back off holiday early for the consultation to then be told that they had to put me back on a waiting list because they'd run out of money for that financial year. So it was, it already, to be honest, it already started to impact my mental health. And the journey was, it was long. It was really difficult. I was a teacher at the time, so navigating work, fertility treatment was really tricky. We did decide at that point, and we kind of discussed with each other, what do we do now? Do we wait for the following year, or do we look at potentially paying privately? And because the impact on my mental health and how long it taken, we did decide to have private treatment. So we went for the consultation and listened to what consultant said, and they recommended at the time they said if it's going to work, it will happen within 3 cycles. So that was what we went into our head with. We didn't have kind of a never-ending number of cycles back then. We were guided by the clinicians. So we had a first cycle, which was unsuccessful. We then had a frozen round, which we did get a positive pregnancy test. And when you're with the and privately, you have a 6-week viability scan. So we went for that. And sadly, there wasn't a viable pregnancy, even though I was getting all the symptoms. So that was a really tricky moment. I remember the clinician at the time said to me, "These things happen." Now, for me, my world had just ended. We went into it quite naively, thinking it's IVF. You hear it on the news and the media, all these miracle stories. So yeah, it was pretty heartbreaking at the time. And we did have more embryos that we used. So we had a further 2 cycles, frozen cycles, which were also unsuccessful. And I remember between the 2 last cycles, we had a break of about a year, because we'd already discussed, this isn't a never-ending thing. There has to be a point. We were 7, 8 years at that time. There has to be a point where you say enough's enough. And people have different reasons for ending treatment. For me, physically, emotionally, mentally, everything. Financially, I think we were just done at that point. So we did wait a year, and we didn't tell anybody about that round. And it wasn't successful. So I think logically we were like, well, we'll just get on with our lives. But emotionally, I spiraled into quite a dark place for a few months. I took some time off work, and to really grieve. And I didn't at the time probably realise it was grief that I was dealing with. It was obviously the loss of the pregnancies, the miscarriage, but also the loss of that life that we thought we were going to have as a married couple, and looking forward. So that really took a long time, a good year in the depths of it, really, to really navigate that grief and to start to feel better about things.
How difficult was it for you to actually realize that you just didn't want to do it anymore? I mean, was that, given what you've been through at that point, was it quite a straightforward decision or was it quite hard?
For me personally, I knew the impact it was having on my relationships, friendships, work, my mental health, and I just knew that I couldn't do it again, not even if somebody paid me. It was not something that I wanted to go through, because, everybody talks about a roller coaster. It's more of a nightmare, really, when it doesn't happen, because you have so much hope and expectation about IVF and, the success rates and things like that, that, nobody really had a frank conversation with us saying, well, actually, it was because we were young and there was no, at the time, it was unexplained infertility. Nobody thought that it wouldn't happen for us. So you go in with all those, with a huge amount of hope and a huge amount of expectation. And I think as each cycle didn't work, that hope just faded. And I just got to the point where, I say to people, I just knew when enough was enough at that time. So, but I was only early 30s, and my friends had started to have children. I looked for role models who had been through treatment and had not been successful, and there was nobody my age. They were a lot older, which is why I then set up the Dovecote Childless Support Organisation to support people who were childless not by choice. And it wasn't specifically for an age group, but there is a huge age range on the support group now. So
You were actually quite young, as you just said, when you made that decision. Did you find it quite hard? I think one of the things that people often say is it's kind of other people's expectations as well as your own about what the outcome might be. I mean, was that something that you went through?
I would, not in terms of family and friends, because they knew how much we'd been through, and they saw that the impact that it had. I wasn't the same person. I remember when I went into teaching, before I got married and started on the fertility journey, and was doing really well in my career. I was head of year, and it really impacted who I was, and I was kind of at the end of it just a former shell of myself. And it's taken probably the last 10 years to really, navigate through that to find my sparkle again. I always talk about, I'd sparkled and I was, a really positive person, trying to look for positives in things. But I think with fertility, it's something that affects so many different aspects of our lives. It isn't, a job, or it isn't, a specific bereavement of somebody, or it really just infiltrates every aspect. And I think that's what's really tricky about it. There is expectation, and I think that expectation came more from people that I didn't know, people that I met, as opposed to kind of the close support network that I had. So part of that was building a bag of toolkits and responses, because you inevitably get really unhelpful comments. So I'd think about, responses to the questions about, do you have children? And I think now I'm into my 40s, I get those questions less. I talk about my little family with my little pups and things. So because they've been a huge part of that the last 4 years, I would say, to kind of help with that nurturing aspect, because it was something that I always wanted to do. And I think, there were options that, we could have looked at. But at the time, I think we'd been through so much. People, I could count, I'd be a millionaire if I could tell you how many times people said, well, why don't you just adopt? Like, it's just an easy thing to do. And for us, it wasn't the right time. We weren't on the same page with it. So it's a big decision to go through when you've already been through so much trauma of the infertility. So it wasn't an option for us at that time, and that we considered. So it's taken a little while to navigate that and to really you know, really appreciate everything that we have because we're very lucky to have the lives that we do. I'm very lucky to have lots of nieces and nephews from 2 days old to 20 years old at the moment. So yeah, I'm able to kind of be a, you know, a fun auntie. You know, they're a huge part of my life as well. So I feel like I'm mother in lots of other ways.
Would you have any tips for other people who are at that point of kind of thinking that they need to make that decision and not being quite sure what to do? What would you say to someone at that point?
Give yourself time. You don't have to rush into a decision. I don't think it's something that you just wake up one day and say, you know, I'm never going to have children, or you know, I'm never going to have my own biological children. It's something that it can feel like quite a gradual process. I would say allow yourself to grieve the losses that you've had, and you know, the life you thought you were going to have. Um, Reach out to people who are in a similar situation. Even though you may think, you know, this is the end now, you may change your mind in like a year's time when you've had time to process it, or something might happen and you think, well, you know, we'll have one more go. I always say to people that I support, it's really difficult, but trying is whatever you're going to regret least. So if there's a little niggle and there's something that you haven't tried, which is really difficult with all the add-ons that are offered to us these days, and there were less back then, which would make things much easier. But if there is a niggle, then you know, head, heart, gut. Just kind of listen to yourself, discuss it. You know, if you've got a partner, if you're on your own, if you've got a support network, just to kind of consider where you're at. To really, you know, you don't have to rush into a decision, um, to really see what the facts are and just try and get as much information as possible. I always described it as like it's a bit like fertility is a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. And with every test and thing that you have, it's kind of another piece of that jigsaw. So sometimes we have to lay out what we've got and think, actually, just going through another cycle, is it worth that anguish and you know how difficult that can be, or am I going to look back and think, well, at least I tried it? I look back and think, I'm so grateful I had the opportunity to pay for my treatment when I did, you know, or I would have had the one cycle on the NHS that I was entitled to. But, you know, I'm grateful that I had that and that I tried that. So I think it's just trying to balance all of those things. And it's not easy. It's not easy. And I wish somebody had said to me that at the stage, you know, 10 years ago, you will be okay, because I didn't, I thought my world had ended. It was a pretty dark place. So, you know, reach out for support, speak to people. You're not alone. I think that's the biggest thing, really.
On the subject of support, I wondered if you could tell us a bit about the group that you set up.
Yeah, of course. So the group is called the Dovecote Community. You can find it on Facebook, and it's for people who have reached the point where they're not looking at pursuing any other treatments. There's people on there who majority have been for fertility, but some are childless by circumstance, and it's just a really safe space to be able to, you know, go lurk initially if you don't want to kind of share, but to see, you know, other people at various different stages of their fertility journeys. And some of them, you know, it's been going now probably 6 or 7 years. So there's people who are, you know, well into kind of the acceptance stage, and there's people that are still joining even this week that have come to the end of their journey and are just looking for that support. So yeah, come and have a look. There's a few questions to join, but you know, it's a really friendly place and we provide tips and inspiration as well.
Kelly, thank you so much for speaking to us today about your experiences of stopping treatment and for your really helpful tips and suggestions to other people as well. So this is one of our series of lived experiences Q&As from the Fertility Alliance, and you can find lots of others on our YouTube channel, which you can access via our website. So thank you very much.